Hello everyone, it's episode 13. It's time for the off-season champs again in Chicago Bears. This year, it's finally going to happen, right? They will translate their exceptional off-season into exceptional year when the ball is actually being snapped. Well, I have my doubts about it. And I actually, for once, even have a doubt about them being called off-season champs. They've improved heavily. I mean, I think the world of Ben Johson, and I really do like most of the work they've done. But there is this kind of continuous belief, and I would say it really comes from the hope that Ben Johson brings towards this organization, and it's finally going to work out. That Ben Johson, pardon my French, shits gold. I mean, only Tywin Lannister does that, and that's even not confirmed. So I understand you, Bears fans, but I will be critical of some things that this team has done in the offseason. And you would be like, well, you said they've massively improved. They did in Ben Johson, and they've improved across the team. But it has to be mentioned, like this team actually entered this offseason in pretty good shape. Hear me out. I understand what you are going to say. Well, this last year was a disaster. Yeah, it was a disaster, a Hail Mary, Matt Eberflus, it all fell apart. But in terms of where this team was at, it had last year rookie quarterback, taken number one overall, one of the hottest prospects in the last 10 years, with 4 more years of cheap control. This team also had around 60 to 70 million in cap space beside their draft picks, so just for free agents. They also had 2 additional second round picks, and they are entering this year with only 4.5 million in dead cap hit for this season. So they could essentially use every single bit of their cap space that every team has allocated towards use for this year with quarterback on a rookie contract. That's super freaking rare. A lot of teams have dead cap hits 40, 50 million. Some of the better teams in doing so have 70 million. So it kind of means that you are only using 3/4 of your total budget. And for the Bears, they use pretty much their entire budget, with a guy on the most expensive position taking 1/6 of the highest paid guy on that position. So that's a really good situation, not to mention those additional second round picks. So, when you think about, well, they got massively better, so they had to done super great job in the offseason, yes and no, because they had a lot of resources to improve. Right? You have really a lot. So I feel like they could have done a better job, not necessarily a hugely better job, but it's like, I'm just coming from that position, like, I understand why you're happy. For all my purposes, continue to be so. I'm glad. These franchise fans, they deserve it. But this is not a show where I'm just going to be all positive or just giving everybody benefit of the doubt. I think the world of Mike Tomlin, and I'm quite critical of him sometimes in this show. So I just want to be clear about that. I'm going to give you my opinions. You can agree, you can disagree. It's totally up to you. But just a preview, I'm not going to be all positive. Because if I were, it would be like, okay, I like Ben Johson, so everything is good. I don't like, say whatever you want. I don't know, who do I don't like? Brian Schottenheimer, everything that Cowboys did is bad. It doesn't work like that. And you would have 0 views of this show. So, I hope that my opinions will give you some perspective. I will try to tell you why I think this is bad, this is good, and as we do. So, just wanted to get this out of my chest, and with that being said, let's take a look at their offseason. We talked about some of the free agency, but there was an episode about that earlier this year, so it's going to be covered pretty shortly, and then we'll talk about the draft. So, in free agency, they kind of set themselves up towards this draft in a way that their offensive line, in terms of starters, is fixed, or they believe it's fixed. I have one question there, and they don't have to necessarily worry about that. They obviously have their franchise guy, and entering the draft, the question was running back position. The question was depth and quality of defensive line, and that was pretty much the major questions. Anything else you would feel good about that. You had DJ Moore and Norman Dunza as your wide receivers. You just paid last year Colt Matthew, paid DJ Moore. In terms of O-line, you've invested. In terms of D-line, you've invested, but you are coming from a position where we still need more. In terms of your linebackers, you are absolutely set. In terms of your secondary, well, could you think about one more safety, perhaps one more corner? You are not sure about Derek Stevenson. Maybe, but pretty much there was a lot of, fixed spots on this team. And the whole belief was, well, if Ashton Jeanty is available, which would never going to happen, but if so, they would take him. And with that, they kind of headed into the draft. And in terms of free agents, I will talk about them when we talk with really divisional grouping, when we talk about offensive line, defensive line, more of how they fit for that money, could have they done better, and how. So let's focus on the draft. And we start with Colston Loveland. And as you can see, my grade for this is C, which means I was not a huge fan of this pick. I was I really do have my doubts that this was the best usage of this pick. And are you done, Bears fans? I totally understand why Ben Johson wants Colston Loveland. He reminds him of Sam Laporta. He will try to use him pretty much the same way as he used Sam Laporta in Detroit. And he might be the guy that this offense is really focused through. I would not be surprised if he has 100 targets this year. I will not be surprised. Where am I then why am I giving this a C, right? Well, because it's the first pick of this regime, and it really feels like screw the value, I really want this guy. And what I mean by screw the value, I feel I doubt that a lot of teams had Colston Loveland above Tyler Warren. I really do. And Tyler Warren was still available. He was picked at 14. So did you need to rush to the table for Colston Loveland? Could you take a call? Perhaps see if you fall into late teens, early 20s. And we'd be like, okay, but maybe, somebody picks Colston Loveland. Then, okay, you have other needs. There is Omarion Hampton likely on the board. Omarion Hampton would be absolute menace in this offense, in my eyes. I would actually, if they picked Omarion Hampton over Colston Loveland here, I would give this kind of a B- to B, because whilst it's still kind of screw the value, I would say the need is bigger there. I think this team needs Omarion Hampton more than it needs Colston Loveland. Then who am I to argue with Ben Johson? Nobody. I am truly nobody compared to Ben Johson in terms of how he understands football, etc. But this is how I feel about Chicago Bears, about this fit, and about value of Colston Loveland. So to me, take phone calls, see if you can drop down to late teens, early 20s, and if Colston Loveland is there, great. Take your guy there, perfect value, perfect fit for you, for what you want to do. I might give you an A for the process. If he's not, take Omarion Hampton. Again, love the process, love the fit, especially it might be a A+ with getting some additional picks. Not doing so, to me, is not necessarily getting the most out of this pick. And not to say that Colston Loveland is not going to be a great player. I really think so. I really think he's going to be a great player, especially with Ben Johson. And then you're then why don't you just take it? Well, because there is a huge chance you could have him and other resources if you played your hand right. So it's not this guy is great, but would you pay $60 million a year for him? Well, or maybe you would rather, kind of try to wiggle and deal him, have him for 40 million and add some other guys for another 20. So it's all about using the resources, and I don't think that this resource was spent the most wisely. Again, it's just a C. My average grade would be B-, so it's just slightly down there. But that's just how I feel about Colston Loveland. And it kind of does pair with Luther Burden here, because to me, when you pick both of these guys, I'm quite concerned about this year, at least early of this year, of Caleb Williams and what it's going to cause in terms of NFL media. Because suddenly you went from 3 weapons that are there. They are paid and highly drafted. So it's kind of hard to get rid of DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, or Romo Dunze. Like one you drafted last year in the first round, the other two guys you paid last off season. So they are here to stay. They were like the mainstay guys for this team. And unless, something crazy happens, they are not going to be gone within the next 2 years. And already last year, with just Keenan Allen in addition, it felt like a lot of the times Caleb was struggling to really distribute the ball well. Now you add two other weapons into the mix. Okay, like you lost Keenan Allen, but you are adding one more weapon, whole new playbook, whole new set of skills when he's going to need to play under center, which is not necessarily what he has done in his career. New play caller, his fourth already. Good luck with that. And there is just a lot on Caleb Williams' plate. And especially when you add Luther Burden, who is kind of the guy that was totally used to the offense going to get run through him, and suddenly here he's like a guy 5, is it going to create a bad environment in an era where, I think Ben Johson is trying to really build the same mentality and same culture as they did in Detroit, like everybody pull, like let's get into this together, like we are in this together. So is Luther Burden the great fit for it? I do question that. You still see me graded this as a B. Why? Because from the skill set point of view, I feel like this guy could have been drafted in 20s. So in terms of, is it a value pick? Yes. Does it necessarily fit? I definitely have my doubt. So if you take either of these guys and didn't take the other, probably the grades for each individual pick would be slightly higher. Overall, I'm not saying these are bad picks. You can see C and B, and I'm not even saying it's not going to work. What I slightly worry is I don't really think they will hit the ground running. I think it's going to take a little bit of time for Caleb to, kind of get the gist of this. And I already see Colin Cowherd, one of those, like in Britain, they have this nice word called pundits for football analytics, like European football for you American watchers. So for you guys, it's soccer. And already he's like, by the October, we know if Caleb can play. And I'm like, no, if he looks like shit through October, I can. It's not that I don't care. That definitely does not mean that he's gone, or he's done. This is going to take time. This is going to take time before everything kind of falls into places. And if Caleb can grasp it within first, 10 weeks, I would say that's an accomplishment. And what kind of even when I really thought about the process here, when I took a couple of days off from the draft and really finalized my grades, it was, I feel like I upgraded the draft grades for at least for Burden in terms of how I view this. It was okay, it could mean that, and if it does, I am actually much on board with the whole situation and with how they view this. Okay, 2025 is not necessarily our year. This is all about establishing the culture, bringing the playbook, adjust Caleb to play it, and don't really get ourselves distracted with everybody's expecting we are going to be great. Because really drafting these two guys feels more like something that should benefit them 2026 and going forward rather than this year, though they are both ready to play. But the fact that they are both ready to play kind of slightly, I would say, overcomplicates things on Caleb. But the fact that he's going to be kind of forced to grasp all of it in all complexity rather than going for some kind of shortcuts, it probably lowers performance in the short time, but upgrades the performance for long term. So I slightly became much more on board with this. Then another pick that I was not necessarily sure about is Ozzy Chapilo. And why? Well, this is a valuable, I think, resource. It's a second round pick in pretty deep draft, especially in terms of defensive line. And I would say your defensive line is a bigger problem than your offensive line. And you drafted Kieran Amagachi last year as a developmental tackle. Now we are drafting a guy that perhaps has higher floor than Kieran had last year, but not necessarily the greatest upside, in my eyes at least. And what this pick kind of really signals to me is they are ready to move on from Braxton Jones next offseason, which to me is just weird. And I was listening to the Bootleg Football guys, really great podcast. I appreciate their minds and I think the world of them. But this is one thing that I kind of didn't see eye to eye or hear ear to ear with them, because they were all about, well, Rams did a great job signing Alaric Jackson last year for it was 18 millions, 19 millions a year as their franchise left tackle. And to me, Braxton Jones and Alaric Jackson is very similar type of guy, lower drafted, not necessarily a guy with the highest upside to be amazing or elite guy, but just a freaking solid franchise left tackle that when you find him, you should pay him and keep him. And, they were so happy for Rams and Alaric Jackson, and somehow both are really cool with the idea of Braxton Jones leaving Chicago in the next offseason. I'm that doesn't sit, or I don't understand how they got to those two different conclusions, although they are higher on Trapilo than me, so they would believe that this is about higher upside. And also it could be the thing of the window. Well, with Alaric Jackson and Matthew Stafford, you really need the window to be now. Whilst with Trapilo taking over Braxton Jones, you are perhaps thinking about 2028, where the money that you saved on Jones and having Trapilo could get to you. So maybe there's that, but to me this was a reach, and also a little bit of just, are you already given up on Kieran Amagachi? I don't know, it feels like it. So that's kind of weird processing, because GM at least is still here the same as it was last year, and expecting Kieran to be great year one was always shit idea. He was and is just a high upside potential, guy that's not going to hit the ground running. So, kind of giving up on him feels wrong. I understand you are all about the depth, but I understand the depth. I would sign a veteran there, but do you need to have two prospects as your depth? Investing second and third round into them, which one of them perhaps turns into something, I am not super happy with usage of this resource. Then Shemar Turner, another guy that was up and down in terms of guys board. Everything I look at and heard, to me this is just a good pick. Really a guy that I think is a little bit of the raw side, but I like those tools, and I think immediately he can help and improve your run defense. I would say he can give enough juice to be out there instead of Grady Jarrett, to kind of keep Grady Jarrett to be his mentor, veteran presence for those games in December, in November, when you can need him. So I think it's fine pick. I don't think it's anything special, but I think it's definitely a fine pick. Ruben Hippolyte, we don't need to spend too much time on this. On nobody's radar. I've seen this guy. He was not on mine. They take him in the fourth round. This is not an F or an E just because it's fourth round pick, and if you saw something that you believe nobody else saw, okay, go for it. I'm going to be critical because, most of the time you are not smarter than everyone. If it's everyone, who almost who the hell is this guy? Yeah, I kind of trust everyone on this rather than, Bears, GM, scouting, whatever department. In Kyle Monangai, I think you definitely took a nice use of. This year was a hugely nice, deep running back class, and then getting a guy that I think could fight Roshan Johnson for that 1B spot with the Swift kind of switching what you want, similar to Montgomery and Gibbs in super dialed down version. I think he can fight Roshan, though I believe Roshan is going to keep his job for now at least. But I definitely like this. I think in 7th round this is a nice value. I don't usually do that. I think it's going to be the first, but let's imagine what I would do with this draft. And And I will have the benefit of the hindsight. I will not do any draft trades, though I will suggest them, but I will not give myself anything other because I already have the benefit of the hindsight. What does it mean? It's just like with every picks, the rest of the picks staying the same, what I would do with the picks that the Bears had. And so, yeah. If I'm not taking Loveland here, I would definitely, like I said, I will think about trade down, because when I was looking at the board, it was not necessarily that I super loved anyone on that spot. Like I said, it could be Omarion Hampton, and I would not hate it. Then I was thinking, well, Kenneth Grant is available. Should I take him? So I will go like one route is Omarion Hampton, the second is Walton Nolan. Then I would say with both of these picks, I keep Luther Burden, because to me he makes more sense when there is no Loveland here in terms of the usage and stuff. So there is also a world in which like you take Nolan and you still are high about like getting a running back. So perhaps, spend maybe that extra second, move back to third and try to sneak up on Trevor Henderson or Quinton Judkins here. I think that was a way, but let's say, it's either Walton Nolan or Omarion Hampton and Luther Burden. Or suggestion is Taylor or Ferguson, though I'm not like super huge on these guys, but if you necessarily want tight end because you want to run 12 personnel, I feel like these guys are not as good as Loveland, but they could do the job. And the reason for that would be I would love Jack Bash coming here as this, I would say really diet version of Amon-Ra St. Brown, really as kicker, blocker, and guy that's going to give it your all. So, that's also an idea I would have. And then instead of Shemar Turner, though I don't think badly about this pick, I would take Darius Alexander. So, overall, if I would redo this in some kind of fashion, it would probably be, perhaps I would definitely like to get some goals, whether it's to move up for Quinton Judkins or even Trevor Henderson. Though with DeAndre Swift, I'm not necessarily sure. I know he's much better pass blocker. Yeah, maybe. At the end of the day, what would be it? So let's go Walton Nolan route. With Walton Nolan, I keep Luther Burden here. With Luther, I would actually go for Harold Fannin as my 56th pick, because I think the world of him. I really feel like this could be a guy that, I'm so excited about him in Cleveland, and I feel like, him and Ben Johson, that there could be a lot of fun ways how they could use him. And again, if you go Ozzy at 62, it's slightly better, but it doesn't necessarily makes the world of difference. Would I just go for Darius Alexander and really be this defensive line is going to be good no matter what? Probably not. I would probably pick up someone from the edge. So let's take a look at it. Or let me check on the draft. Who was there with that pick? And Jackson could be. I think Princely or Mamellan would make some sense for them, as a kind of passer specialist for them as early as this year. I wouldn't definitely mind Dylan Fairchild, really going to solidify that. I'm there. So it's Walter Nolan, it's Luther Burden, it's Harold Fannin, and it's Dylan Fairchild. What does this do to me compared to this draft? So I've kind of exchanged my premium from tight end towards defensive line. I keep Luther Burden as a weapon. I kind of get my toy gadget player in Harold Fannin for this offense. So I'm keeping it, but in Harold Fannin, I'm not necessarily saying that he needs to get funneled through because he is a late second round pick, kind of like this weird guy from a small school. And then instead of having the development guy on the edge, on the like tackle, I instead go for the guard because I feel like that's where I'm more vulnerable. So, let me know what you think. I would prefer this type of draft for the Bears, but overall, I would definitely be on the phone and try to trade down from that number 10 pick and see where that lands me. Overall, I'm not saying this is a bad draft. I think it's a solid one, but with how many resources they had, I think they could have done a better job. Okay, we are almost 30 minutes in and we haven't started to dig into the roster, so let's do it. We start with offensive line, and as we said, this was a huge work in progress. They pretty much say, well, we hated our interior, there was too much pressure in face of Caleb Williams. Well, let's change that. And we like our tackles, though we like Darnell Wright, and we don't necessarily like Braxton Jones because we want to replace him and save some money. Okay, I already said about this. I think Braxton Jones is a franchise tackle. Is he, I think he's average. In terms of left tackles, there's way too many great of them. I think he's capped in it, but that's definitely to me worth 20 to 25 million. And anyone who's like, well, then Moore got 20, so I'm like, so what? So he gets 25 and he's much better player than Moore, and you are happy with your franchise tackle getting 25 millions because the best are getting much, much more than that in next year. So yeah, I'm absolutely okay. Let's take it down. Darnell Wright, slam dunk pick. He continues to develop future, he could be in the conversation for future top 3 right tackle. Obviously, Penei Sewell in his own division is kind of always be the shadow that he probably is hide behind. And you also have Zach Tom, so that's kind of cruel, man. It might actually happen if Lane Johson retires at some point, in early future, that he might be the third best right tackle in his own division as well as the third best right tackle in the league. I mean, there's Lugericki, there are other guys, but yeah, the quality of right tackles in this division is nuts. I mean, even Vikings have a great one, and not Christian there, so that's left tackle, and Brian O'Neill. So yeah, somehow, some way, this division takes a premium on right tackles. That's insane horde of talent on right tackles. But okay, with tackles, whatever we think about Chapello, Jackson Jones conversation, I think it's definitely a conversation for next year. Some say Chapello could overplay him. I'm like, I would be shocked if that's happened. Let's go inside. So Joe Thuney, they spent 4th round on him with the trade with the Chiefs. They paid him through 2027, so this is kind of outdated graphic, but they didn't necessarily pay the world to him. It was 16, 17 millions a year, and it makes him sign through his age 34, 35, and that's absolutely great contract. It's definitely, it even changes this to an A+, because if Joe Thuney by the end of this contract is still great, well, you have Caleb Williams, you have Ben Johnson. If everything's go right, he's going to want to stay because this will be the team to stay in. And if he's not great, then, well, okay, you get out of that contract before he declined. And if he doesn't want to stay, well, the most likely reason is Caleb Williams is not good or Ben Johnson is not good somehow, some way. And then you have much bigger problems than Joe Thuney not staying. So huge thing, easily top 3 move or top 5 move in terms of free agency / trades. Huge one for this. With Drew Roman, I understand this free agent signing. I'm even probably one of the highest people on Drew Roman where I have him ranked. And I think in terms of run blocking, he's going to fit well. But in terms of you wanted to improve your pass rush protection, because you really need that for Caleb, you can do definitely better than Drew Roman. And, it's not necessarily the pass blocking upgrade that you would like to see for as much money you have thrown into this position. So I think it's a good signing. I don't think it's a great, and I am really high on Drew Roman as a player. So I was understand, you have the money, spend it, but if you expect that this is the guy that's going to keep Caleb protected? Not necessarily. He's going to improve your run game. And then Jonah Jackson, and this is where I will have the word of criticism for this. One, I do understand in terms of he worked with Ben Johson in Detroit 2-3 years ago. He had Pro Bowl season, which he should have not have, but Detroit fans are crazy. So you know what you are getting. But the money, you've willingly took contract from the Rams on your shoulders, or most of it. And I'm like, this much for Jonah Jackson. I mean, what? What is this contract? So, I mean, Rams took him. They signed him to a bad contract. I kind of believe that he would have been topped by the Rams, and he would sign somewhere, perhaps perhaps he would get nice deal because guards are scarce to find by. But I mean, we've seen them more getting 20 million a year. So, in that world that we live in, it doesn't seem like that high. But oh man, this is just too much for Jonah Jackson, and the fact that you kind of willingly took it upon yourself rather than sign him as a free agent. If he is a free agent and you sign him to 2 years, 24 millions, okay. But this is kind of 3 years, 40, 45, and it's just way, or 48 even. It's just way too much for Jonah Jackson. So the 7th round pick, it's whatever, but this is not good. So that's really one of the moves when kind of Ben Johson, has to prove me right. He obviously doesn't have to, but this is one of the moves where I'm there are still things to learn as NFL head coach and guy that works with GM. And I would say this one was Ben kind of really want to get this thing done. Let's bring a guy that understands, that I've worked with, whatever it takes. And here it took way too much in terms of money that it took. Now, Caleb Williams, tell what you want about Caleb and about his fingernails and whatever. Was his year one great success? No. Could it be? I don't think so. And I told you guys last year when I was I hate them staying put at number 1 and picking Caleb whilst keeping Matt Eberflus, because you don't want this type of talent to be paired with defensive-minded head coach on a freaking hot seat. Because, well, what could go wrong? I kind of warned you. This is going to happen. There was a huge chance that the season was going to play exactly as it was. Tough division. You are not there. You need this guy to improve, and you take the quarterback coach, you move him in 4 weeks to be your offensive coordinator because offensive coordinator does not work. I don't think it was Shane Waldron or someone else, whatever. And then when Matt Eberflus gets fired, you even take him from that position towards a head coach interim. So Caleb kind of goes through 3 guys that are taking care of him or not taking care of him because they have other things to do. And it's complete chaos. And this was all kind of predictable because Matt Eberflus was on the hot seat. I'm either stay put and fire Matt Eberflus before last year, go for Ben Johson, go for some offensive-minded head coach, do it, or trade away from that number 1 pick, because there's a high chance you are going to ruin Caleb Williams. And I don't think he's ruined. I think he actually, given the environment, he was actually pretty solid. I don't think this is, all done. He made some mistakes that we are not used from him, from the college. But overall, given the environment, I think he actually done all right. And that's why, I view mostly positive his future, because now he has O-line, now he has competent now he has great offensive mind and hopefully immediately competent head coach. And that's where if I'm right about more of the vision for Loveland and Burden, which is we talk about more of install this, really take it the toughest way possible in order to get the highest rewards, but not really make it about right now, really gives me confidence that even if we see similar Caleb in year 2, I don't think it's a huge problem. Maybe I'm wrong, and obviously Bears fans, they are super hyped, and I understand this for this year, but I would say hold your horses, make sure that you have not broken Caleb Williams, and trust Ben Johson that he takes the toughest road in order to really create a monster, rather than taking it the most efficient road for this year, but the payback is not necessarily the highest. So I hope that's going to come to fruition like this. With that being said, this offensive line is massively improved. Is it the greatest offensive line in the league? No, it's around top 10. There is some big questions, especially in Jonah Jackson, and some protection for Drew Dalman, but definitely a huge upgrade over what you had last year, and good job overall. Though, could have you done better? I think absolutely so. Now, for the weapons, there is plenty of them. So where to start? Well, DJ Moore. I told you guys last year that he's going to have an outstanding season, that he finally has a quarterback. Well, sometimes I'm wrong, because DJ Moore last year was kind of like really good, but not elite by any metric. Like, he was more just great than he was elite last year, and that was a bit of a disappointment. Was it more about all the turmoil, not having chemistry perhaps with Caleb? Everything's possible. I don't definitely rule out ascension to eliteness for DJ Moore this season with Ben Johson, but I was disappointed by DJ last year, because he has everything that an elite wide receiver can have, and I think still he is legit a guy that you can run your offense through, and he is still, I think, going to be a huge part of this offense. There comes some of the questions with Luther Burden pick, because similar to Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze last year, Luther Burden is kind of diet DJ Moore in a lot of areas, and that's what does it mean for the future of DJ Moore? He has 3 more years on his contract, so how are we thinking? Do we think that they can work together? Do we have it schemed up? I mean, I'm excited, but I have my doubts. Then Colt Matt, to some really great tight end, to some just an average, slightly overpaid guy. To me, it's somewhere between. I think he's kind of the 12th best tight end in the league that could be a better blocker, but is a solid enough blocker that it absolutely works as a guy that can be there for everything, to do everything as a tight end, and he has good hands, not necessarily great hands. He is some threat after the catch, not the best one. So kind of the definition of your slightly above average tight end. I like him, but I'm not necessarily stoked by him. So his pairing with Colston Loveland, I think, can work. It's not like they necessarily cannot play next to each other, and I think this team is going to be heavy in 12 personnel with Loveland and Kmet. So from this, I totally get what they are trying to do. It's is it just too complicated flavor for Caleb to work out year 1? Well, maybe, but maybe that's not necessarily what we are focusing on. In Rome Odunze, I'm excited about his year, because like we said last year, his skill set with Keenan Allen are a little bit redundant. Now Keenan Allen is not here. He should be really a nice guy to really feed in that intermediate part of the field for this offense. So I'm excited about him. How much perhaps Colston Loveland is going to eat into his workload. How much Luther Burden is it's I'm intrigued. Can it be a big year for Rome? I hope so. It's just it's a little bit too much for a guy that did not necessarily show me already that he can handle even slightly less. Again, I've talked about it with Tampa Bay Bucks, with Baker Mayfield. I think if you give Baker Mayfield this amount of weapon, he's absolutely happy. If you give it to Joe Burrow, these are the guys that can distribute it. With Caleb, I hope so that he can. I have my doubts about this year. Then towards the under Swift, and that's one of the main criticism that I will have for the offseason that the Bears had is like not addressing the running back spot, other than Kyle Monangai in 7th round. Because to me, this was really good year to do so. Nice draft. There were guys in 1st round, 2nd round. To me, would be immediate upgrade and really can take this run game that I think is going to be a huge part of this offense towards the next level. And DeAndre Swift, for what it's worth, had his best year under Ben Johnson. But at the same time, I would say Ben Johnson had a huge word in terms of, well, DeAndre, get the F out because we need something better. And like, he was in a way so fed up with him that they, say F the draft and drafted Jahmyr Gibbs like super high, which nobody agreed at the time, and they were wrong because like Jahmyr Gibbs is a freaking monster. But like the idea that you are suddenly like satisfied with DeAndre Swift is like weird to me. And I don't think DeAndre Swift became like much better player since he left Detroit. Like he was run out of town in Philadelphia, and last year, like, he to me is one of the worst starting running backs. Like, occasionally you get his super flash plays where he runs for 30 yards because he's freaking athletic and elusive as hell. But most of the time he just chooses wrong, doesn't take what is there, and you are frustrated. And I would say Ben Johnson got so frustrated and he ran him out of town and drafted Jahmyr Gibbs. So I was really surprised with like really kind of keeping this room intact. Now I wonder if it could be a little bit of the downfall for Bears this year. In terms of backups, for QB, it's either Case Keenum or Tyson Bagent. It's like whatever one is, veteran that you don't really think too highly about at this point of his career. The other is, career, perhaps solid backup in Tyson Bagent. I don't really feel like there's too much in there. And I think your season is gone if Caleb just goes down. Like it's that easy. In terms of backups, other than that, Roshan Johnson, I think he's going to get his fair share of touches. I think Ben Johnson will like work with this as like a diet version of David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Though to me it's really a diet version, almost like no sugar version. Like there's a huge difference between these two. And I will not be shocked if in next off season they will like treat this group very similarly to how they treated interior offensive lines. Like everybody's gone, we are taking totally 3 new guys. We are fixing this, throwing money, throwing draft picks at it, whatever. Let's fix this, because I think this could be a group that actually holds them back. Because I think Ben is really good in scheming up the run game, and I think these guys could hold him back. In terms of weaponry, you are actually like kind of 5, like kind of too much to feed, and then it's like starvation. Like you don't necessarily have too much to talk about after. In terms of tight ends, it's like Durham Smythe, Stephen Carlson, kind of like whatever. And in terms of wide receiver, Tyler Scott, who like cannot hit the ground running here. Devin Duvernay, Olamide Zaccheaus, maybe, So to me, like almost too much, and then like too big of a gap. So it's kind of good that if one goes down, it could actually slightly benefit Caleb because it eases the decisions that he has. But also, if you continue to really like rotate heavy 5 guys like this, you don't necessarily have a nice replacement for them. So I'm really intrigued how this is going to work. In terms of offensive line, I really like that they got Ryan Bates here. He's kind of your really nice backup for every interior position here. So veteran that's ready to play. And you don't want him out there necessarily as your starter, but as your backup, you take that every day of the week. And in terms of tackles, well, you have Ozzy Chapelo and Kieran Amagachi. So you don't have experience, but you have youth. So this is kind of your 8 deep. It's solid. It's not special, but it's solid. And you have really your 4 strong and Jonah Jackson. So take it or leave it. Now, let's switch to the defensive side. And the defensive side is going to be oversaw by Dennis Allen. And, for as much hype Ben Johson gets here, this is not as good as a signing, but it's really top-notch signing for them, because I think Dennis Allen and his defenses with Saints were working. Kind of like Matt Eberflus, like his defense was working. Like, he had his shortcomings as a head coach. He was defensive minded, and like all of that comes with that, and his personality was kind of like, it was weird. But at the same time, he made this defense really good. And now he kind of, it's like with a lot of teams, you would be like, well, we want to fire this head coach as like a defense first guy or like defensive overseer, but like in best case scenario, we would actually like to like keep him and like oversee the defense. It obviously cannot happen, or like nobody kind of like, okay, I don't, you want to sack me as head coach, but can I stay as the defensive coordinator? Yeah, it doesn't go like this. But here it kind of does, in a way that, from a fired head coach in Dennis Allen and fired head coach in Matt Eberflus, you actually take Dennis Allen and you plug him into this defense. And last year he was still coaching Saints, and I think his defense was still working. So I would say you do not downgrade in terms of this. And you actually, I think, slightly upgrade in Dennis Allen. And at the same time, you get a guy that should be here for at least 5 years, unless you fire him, because it's going to be hard for him to get, I think, third head coaching opportunity as a defensive-minded head coach in this league, and how they view this type of hires. Well, no. So you kind of got the best of all the worlds, in which like you didn't demote Matt Eberflus, which like, imagine feelings aside and everything, if you just took care of this defense, I think you would be still happy. But you kind of get this in Dennis Allen. I would say it's slightly better. You also get a guy that really, I think, allows Ben Johson to like, okay, I don't have to be there. You are grown up. You can take off this. You took care of franchise for a long time. Like you can even be like my mentor in some things. Great. So love this hire. Now, what he has to work with. In terms of defensive line, it's competent. It's not great, but it's competent. Now, it starts with Montez Sweat, who I think, to me, he does not crack the list of the guys that to me are like game changers from defensive line. Though like he changed this defensive line when he came, but I think it was much more of a testament of how bad it was, rather than like Montez Sweat is the great thing. So like he is close to that, but to me he's like really great player that ideally he is your one of the two best defensive linemen, almost like one of the three that are kind of on his level, or he's like your second best. Here he has to be your best, but it's in much better situation than in past years, because you have up and coming Gavin Dexter, who I think has the potential to be your one. I was really impressed how he improved from year 1 to year 2. It was always the case for him that he has every like physical tools, and I would say even like a work ethic. It's just like something needed to click for him in terms of like technique, how to get off stance, how to actually react to snaps, because that was kind of his problem in college, and it starts to click. And I really feel like this could be difference-making guy. And if you have him next to Montez Sweat, suddenly you are definitely in the business. Then at your number 2, you've signed Grady Jarrett that Falcons were kind of happy to get rid of. It was partially because they wanted to save some money and they were like cap-strapped, so that played into that. But it's also Grady Jarrett is not Grady Jarrett from like 2020. Is he a nice like fine for 2-3 years as a band-aid? It was expensive, but I would say very reasonable in terms of like how much these guys cost, that you are bringing, I would say, great mentor to Gavin Dexter and, up and coming for Shemar Turner. And yeah, it makes sense. The similar is for Dao Adeyingbo. Like you hope that his trajectory can like uprise. He's totally Dennis Allen guy, like kind of he had similar type of player in Cameron Jordan, like really this big-bodied edge that's primarily going to stop the run, and you hope that he's going to add some pass rush to it. Is there potential for him to do so? Yes, but for him and for Grady, they paid good amount of money, not decimating amount of money for both of these guys. So understandable signings, but in terms of like, was it super value, super great? Does it solve all their problems? Not necessarily. And with Grady Jarrett, if there is a decline as I would say as big as was there from him like in last 2 years, then it actually could turn out into kind of an ugly contract. Though I don't think I have my numbers right on one of these guys, because it's highly unlikely they would get the same deals. So I'm going to upgrade you on that. Where are you guys? Well, give me a second. I'm sorry, there is some problem. Okay, so Dio is 8. Yeah, so this is Dio's number. Grady's are actually very similar. It's 7 for 2025, 19 for next year, and 16.7 for the year after. So it's very similar. In terms of guarantees, Grady has 20 and 45 guarantees. So it's really very similar contract, just Grady is slightly turned down. I mean, he's 32, played for 10 years. They can get rid of him after 2026 with only 4 million in that cap. So it's essentially a 2-year contract. It's good. It's good. It's not special. It's good. And that's where I'm like talking about. So there were like a lot of good signings, good picks. Only few things that were like super great in terms of value. And that's where I'm like, so you've done good. I think you could have done more. Now, towards linebackers, I have this group described as like TJ Edwards to me is the brain, is the heart and commitment, and it's like this, little pit bull in a way, but like with brain that like he's going to fight you for every freaking yard. And then there's Tremaine Edmunds, who is kind of your legs. He is everywhere, like he is speed, he is athlete. And when you combine this together, you have pretty nice linebacker duo. To me, TJ is better and well-rounded player, though he's being paid like $10 million less, because that's how market works. And Tremaine Edmunds has better career highlights and it was drafted in the first round. And I kind of said that Matt Eberflus needs to make this guy work. That it's kind of tied to his job. Like obviously, it was other areas that run him out of town, but he didn't make Tremaine Edmunds to be what they are paying him to be. So definitely in terms of, is he worth the money they are paying him? Hell no. But when you combine it that you have such a nice value on TJ Edwards, it kind of works. It kind of works out. It's how would I put it, like coping math in a way. But overall, it's definitely one of the most well-rounded linebacker room in the league. And definitely area that I'm not worried about, but mostly because of TJ Edwards. Now, before we go and talk about secondary, let's take a look at what they have to work with in terms of backups. Jack Sanborn, I don't believe he's there anymore. I think he let go. Yeah, he was let go, which to me was kind of surprising because he signed, I would say, some kind of minimal contract. Let me check up on this one. Sorry guys for the mistake in the graphic. Yeah, he signed 1.5 million with the Cowboys. I'm like, why did you let him go? Because like he's freaking solid linebacker, and for 1.5 million, I mean, I don't understand this. Like, it's actually one of the nice finds for the Cowboys. So sorry for this. In terms of backups, they have like Noah Sewell, Amen Ogbon Babiga. Sorry for butchering this name. I was trying. So in terms of backups, yeah, I'm kind of worried if somebody goes down. Probably take and play Noah Sewell there, but that's a huge downgrade in my eyes. So I was really shocked they didn't bring Jack Sanborn back. Maybe he wanted to go somewhere where he has chance to be a starter, which is not here. But like I think money could save that, and like throw 2.5 million on him instead of 1.5 from Dallas, and I think he's still here. I think you feel much better about that. So yeah, I think that might be why I left him here, because like I was just expecting, I think they could have had him for like a restricted free agent. So it was like they actually chose to not bring him back for like some really, even like that 1.5 million. I think they actively chose not to bring him back for 1.5 million, which is like, one of those weird things I think this front office has done in this offseason that I was not a huge fan. In terms of backups for defensive line, Andrew Billings, if healthy, he is a solid enough rotational defensive tackle. The problem is he is never healthy, so it kind of sucks. Then you have Shemar Turner, you have Sex Pickens, so you kind of have your youth and rotational guy for this interior, and you don't necessarily have great depth in terms of edge, because I would say like your best guy to plug into edge group is like Austin Booker, who's a 5th round dart throw last year, and like he has some pass rushing moves, he showed that. But for him to be your third best guy from the edge, especially in the world where Dowding like tends to slide inside on some downs, so he's not necessarily playing like the true edge. Yeah, that's also why I'm like, this was a great draft to do so. Like even at that spot, like when you drafted Ruben Hippolyte, let me check on who was still there from edge. Where you drafted Ruben? Okay, so who was here? Q Robinson, not necessarily. Ingram Dawkins, Brandon Swinson could have been here. Okay, we are probably way too down on the board. Yeah. Is there anyone else who I would really like? Okay, probably not. Probably that 4th round was like way too late for you to really get the best of this great draft in terms of edge. But with this depth, not really addressing the situation, it's a little bit worrying. Like it really is. So I wonder what like if Montez Sweat gets injured, like what are you going to do, guys? Like. Well, we will see, I guess. So yeah, interior has depth, edge really doesn't. Now let's talk about the secondary. It's a really nice one. It really is a nice one. I think Kevin Byard proved a lot of people wrong last year, where after being cast out from the Eagles and previously from the Titans and signing like 2 years, 15 million, it's like, okay, this is kind of his farewell, whatever. I think he played really good ball. Like, is he the old Kevin Byard? No, but is he like dropping down the same way as, like, for example, Grady Jarrett or like Cam Jordan, the guys that we've mentioned, where it's like once upon a time these guys were menaces and now they are kind of like guys. I would still say that Kevin Byard last year was damn good. I'm a little bit worried about him and the scheme fit here, and also like later in the year I think there were more of those signs of age for him. So I don't necessarily think he's going to keep up with his important starter ranking for this year. I think he probably is going to end up as a good starter. But for the money you are paying him, I think you got yourself a nice deal. Next to him, Jaquan Brisker, who is like guy I'm worried about, because he had to be forced to like not play last year because of concussions. And for him, his greatest trait, I would say, was he loves to hit people, and like, not to compare Jaquan Brisker to Cam Chancellor, and concussions are not like neck problems, but when you have the problems with what you do the best, what you like to do the most, it's like, how are you going to change your game? Can you even change your game? Can it be the same you, or are you actually going to be like forced to medically retire, or are you actually going to be a non-factor because suddenly the thing you are best at, you kind of cannot do? So I'm worried about Jaquan Brisker's future. I thought like this could have been a huge year for him, and it unfortunately wasn't. And I wonder about what this year is going to be for him. And at the same time, like behind him, you have Elijah Hicks. I think is a solid enough prospect, but not necessarily a guy that I want to be relying on next to aging Kevin Byard in terms of my safeties, and then it's like Jonathan Owens, who I really don't want to be relying on. So another like position that was, I think, out there in this draft, and you did not necessarily address it, So hopefully it's because Jaquan Briscoe's situation is getting better and you are kind of certain that we are past the worst. But are we? I don't know. So with the idea of resume, I don't have a problem. With the potential reality, perhaps week 5 when Kevin Byard slows the hell down, which could happen, and Jaquan Briscoe cannot play because of concussion, this could be actually a problem. And it would be a shame because this group of corners is really, really nice. So you have Kyler Gordon, whom they paid just like a couple days ago, top slot corner money, and he absolutely freaking deserves. So he's a stud, no question about that. Is he a guy that's going to be the most influential? The position kind of stops you from doing that. And no, I don't think he has like the potential to be recognized as like top 15 corner in the league, but top 5, top 3 slot corner in the league for next 3, 4, 5 years, perhaps. Hell yeah, and you take that. With Jalen Johnson, I think he's in the conversation for who the next best guys are after Derek Stingley, after Sauce Gardner, and after Defensive Player of the Year in Pat Surtain. I would have these 3 guys, like not confidently ahead of him, but ahead of him. And then it's like him, Christian Gonzalez. I would definitely put Devon Witherspoon in the conversation. Some guys would put the old heads and Jair Alexander there and Jalen Ramsey there. I have my questions about especially Jair, because like we have not seen him healthy for like more than 10 games for a long time. So I do have definitely, like, I would not put Jair on that list. With Jalen, there is a conversation to be had, but he would still probably be after these guys. But Jalen Johnson, I think he's probably kept out. Like, he's not the fastest guy, and like it's hard to play corner when like your speed is not even like not elite, but it's not even really great. Like it's just great. But everything else he kind of has. He's rangy, he's toolsy in terms of like he has his mind as his biggest tool, and yeah, he's just a number 1 guy that you absolutely love to have. And then it's the question, who is going to be your number 2 outside corner between Tyreek and Terrell Smith? I think it's going to be Tyreek because the scheme fit. I think Dennis Allen loves his man-to-man, and Tyreek Stevenson lived in man-to-man in college. So I think he's going to be happy to come back, and this actually could be quite a breakout year for him. I was calling out for his release last year, and to me it was much more, I want to release him to make a statement for his team rather than I don't think he has a future within his team. And that's why ultimately I was like, you probably cannot do it. But at the same time, could it have saved the season? Like, I would really like, if I had like a magical power and just like see what the future would look like if after the Hail Mary they just immediately cut him and said, not like this, guys, not like this. We are not going to, do shit like that. What would it do for the culture of the team? Would they really? And actually, like, at that point they were still like 5-3. Like, a lot of people don't want to like really think about those guys, because like that season was really started nice and it kind of went totally to the shit after the Hail Mary. And I wonder if part of it was not like, well, this guy got away with doing this. Like, why the hell should I work out? Especially for, offensive coordinator was already fired. Now head coach is on super hot seat. It's like, F this. And it really felt like this for some players on this team. So I don't know. I like, if I had like a magical button to just get the report how that future played out. If they released Eric Stevenson, I would love to have the report. I obviously don't have that power. I don't have the report. But, I think for now they are super happy that he is here, and I don't feel like he could have a really nice year. So watch out for him. And if not, Terrell Smith, I think, is a really nice backup to have. Probably a guy that you mostly like as your 4th deep guy, but this is definitely a number 4 corner that a lot of teams are going to envy you. So that was pretty much it in terms of backups for the corners and safeties. Jonathan Owens, like I told you, like I'm not super happy with him starting from the area that his coverage is like very, very mediocre. He has some areas that he can help, though. It's more of a run defense. I don't know, like kind of a one-dimensional player. Like perhaps like him next to Kevin Byard, like where is your like agility in there? So I'm not sure. Like perhaps in some situation it can work. The same with Elijah Hicks. In terms of corners, you are kind of those four guys, and you drafted Zach Frazier, so you are kind of okay. So I think the depth is good enough here. Problem is depth with linebackers and edge for sure. Now, where does this leave this team for this year in terms of schedule? Well, I predict them to win 8-9, and how that's going to happen. So first couple of weeks to me is really going to be finding fits, finding what works, how are we going to incorporate all of these weapons, how these new concepts Caleb Williams is able to grasp. And even though I don't think this is necessarily the hardest schedule, but you have 3 games on the road, you start against Vikings at home, game 1, huge out of the gate, then Ben Johson goes back to the line, so that's going to be a hell of a start. And then Cowboys, I think you should beat Raiders on the road, tough ask. Commanders on the road, tough ask. So I don't think this operation is actually going to hit the ground running. And to me, this is going to be 2-3, and perhaps pump a break a little bit. Then the mid part of the season, feast or fears. This is all about Caleb Williams. Can he start to absolutely understand the offense, grasping it, doing everything that Ben Johson wants him to do, and really figuring it out? Well, I don't think so. At the same time, I'm not scared of it. Like, I think this is much more of a narrative that, mostly in terms of fears, in terms of like what the media is going to push out. Like, if by this time of the year Caleb has like 12 touchdowns to 10 picks, and it's like sometimes it's ugly, sometimes it's good, I think this is going to be kind of a shitstorm on Caleb, because it would be like, oh, they invested in the O-line, they signed Ben Johson, they have all these weapons, and he still cannot make it work. I'm like, I think this could be narrative, and it's going to be really, really big for Caleb and overall like Ben Johson not to let it get into his head. Because again, if I'm right about this is all about taking the highest level of difficulty that is going to have its growing pains, and I think they are going to show. Like week 10 against Giants, that's defensive line that could really deliver pressure on Caleb. I think that this could be a game that Bears lose to a Cowboys that perhaps are like 3-6 at that point, and people will going to freak out, because this is definitely a game in which Caleb could look really bad, because I think that's one of the D-lines that can absolutely overmatch even this good of an O-line. But let's go. And then you have Vikings and Brian Flores, so good luck with that. And then Steelers. So yeah, this is a stage after like the narrative could be really getting nasty. And to me, it's all about don't get it into your head, focus on the process, not be discouraged if this year is just good, because from where it could be, with like how much you screwed Caleb in year 1, I think it's absolutely okay. So this is much more one of the narratives that I was like, well, it's not necessarily mine, but I think it's going to be surrounding Caleb at this point of time. Then for the rest of the year, the schedule gets nasty, like at Eagles, at Packers, at Lambeau in, I think it's December game already. Yeah, good luck with that. Then you have Browns at home, so kind of hopefully feel good game, but still Myles Garrett is going to come to town, so something to think about that. Then Packers at home, at 49ers, and Lions at home. To me, this is about their no Super Bowls. This might not be about making a playoffs at this point of time, which, to some will feel like disappointment. But if you can screw Packers out of playoffs, or if you can go 2-0 against Packers again, or you can win another game at Lambeau, I think that takes a huge tools for the culture that Ben Johson and I think Dennis Allen and overall they are trying to establish there. So this is their no Super Bowl. Jalen Johnson here think he could be a guy that could deliver some pick sixes against Jordan Love. He likes to take his chances, and against the Dennis Allen man-to-man defense, they are going to look that they are there, but I think Jalen Johnson can sneak up on them. So I'm predicting one pick six for Jalen Johnson in those 2 games. You can call me if you bet on this and you win some money, or don't call me if you don't. No, just nothing to I'm not ordering you to. It is just my gut feeling, nothing more than that. But to me, if they go 3-3 in this part of the year, it's not bad. And I would say this is all what this year, actually successful year, at least in my eyes, would be. If it's just not bad, if Caleb isn't screwed, if he makes progress, if we find fits for this offense, how to work, if we establish what Ben Johnson wants to do, if Dennis Allen, kind of identifies where he needs to improve on this defense. And I understand, I'm predicting them just to have one more games win than, for example, Panthers or even a Giants do. I think this team is better, but this division is scary as hell. So that's part of it. So the fact that some teams, I predict them the same win-loss record or just one win above them, does not mean that I think those teams are necessarily on the same level. It's all about what are you facing, because there could be a team that I will predict 9-8, and I would feel I think that this team is actually worse than the team that I'm predicting 7-10. But it's all about the competition you are facing as well. I'm not all about that. It's part of it, of course. So overall, to me, if Bears go 8-9 and all of the things I've said are kind of true, I feel good about this. It's not special, but it's definitely not disappointment in my eyes. And I overall think there's a lot of reasons to be excited about Bears, though don't necessarily feel like it all will come to fruition this early in the process. With that being said, I hope you had a nice time. It was one of the longer episodes. We tried something new. Please leave a like, leave a comment if you are still here. Tell me how you've enjoyed it, and see you with the next one. Bye bye.